Take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hi, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April Burden.
And I'm Virstyne Henry.
Please check out our website at truthertalk.com. So, hey, what's going on, Virstyne? What's up?
What's nothing? What's nothing? What's up? I know. So
What's up?
Today we have Chris Emery and Mary Ellen Moore discussing their new movies, The Shattering.
Yep.
And huh?
This is our third time having Chris on the show. It's our first time with Mary Ellen, so our first time meeting with her. But we saw the film. What'd you think?
It was really good. I wish I had that in high school, like had this information in high school. I think this is a good film, not only for adults, but I mean it's really a good history movie, and a lot of the information that I'm coming across now, I'm like, God, I wish I would have known this in high school.
So Alice thought too, apparently. Could you hear her?
yeah. You know what, though? By the time you get to high school, we'll have you all set up for 12.
Yeah.
That's already for you. You'll be...
Should be straight.
Yeah. Right?
She'll be all good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never... the thing that I found interesting was the Council on Foreign Relations. A lot of the stuff I knew, a lot of it I didn't. And I'm honestly, I watched it one go around and I really liked it, but it was so much information. I'm probably going to have to watch it a second or third time just to be able to absorb it and also to relay it back, to people. Because when you see a lot of stuff too, you see it presented in a movie, then you want to go and check it for yourself to see, if not, I'm not saying that they're lying. I don't think they are, but it's a lot of tidbits that they're giving you, but it's a little bit more detailed than, they can fit in a 2-hour movie. Yeah. So what I was saying about the Council on Foreign Relations is that it's very, it was surprising to me that they had all of these people that were, that were in politics, but also in media, that were members of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah, it is true, and it's what they do kind of, they put it together because people, they go around and talk about the New World Order, but then they, and that it's a conspiracy, but they're really kind of showing you how it's not. There's these people, and this is what this one world government, that's out there and makes decisions for people, and they're in all these areas of politics and entertainment and so on and so forth. And they just present that in a film. I'm sure they could go even deeper if they wanted to. Yeah. If they had the time, but for the 2 hours that, because it's just a little over 2 hours, I think, they did a really good job, like touching on a lot of things and touching on how they get these positions of power, through manipulation and using false flags and all these other things that they do. Yeah. And you present a little bit of that, and it's like you said, historical.
Yeah, it's really funny, too. It just seems like they use the same script. Once you're hip to this stuff, they use the same tactics and the same script the whole time. And because people are so unconscious of how the world really works, it always works. It never fails. But the tactics they're using, they're so just, trivial is not the word I'm looking for. It's just so, basic.
Predictable.
Yeah, predictable and basic. So it's just like, okay, well, we have a dictator in a country, we're going to build him up and make him a hero, and then we're just going to, then we'll find a way to rip him down so we can go into their country and invade them and steal their resources and make them conform to us. The Americans are always the good guys, and anybody else that's not is the bad guys, and we know the right away. And this is the same story that's been played out over and over again, and it just amazes me, especially in the information age that we're living in, that people still aren't hip to it, that people still can't see through it, But I think a huge reason for that is people don't know the history. People don't understand the history,
No, we've been lied to about history. We've been deceived, over and over and over again. This big deception since starting, since we're children. I mean, that's a good point that you bring up. You wish you'd had that in high school, or, some of these things, even middle school, at 12, 13, you can start to learn some of this information, or, bit by bit. I mean, even younger, if just not in this type of movie form, but in other ways, you can start to just tell kids the truth, about bad people in the world and power and so on and so forth. If you go back and, old philosophers. I mean, it's not like anything new. You know what I mean? Like, I was been listening to some of the works of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. Just in my spare time. That's what I do when I'm dusting around the house. It's true. But anyway, I've been just kind of interested in old philosophy, and I find, if you go back and look at Plato's Republic, and he's corresponding these, or he's writing down, was it Socrates? I think it was Socrates, who Socrates never wrote anything down, and so everything that is known about him is through Plato. And so Socrates is basically comparing people to sheep, and he's saying how people don't, they want to kind of fit in. And, very rarely do they kind of examine what's really going on around them. And that sometimes, and he was very against, what the rule in the land was, in Athens at the time, was democracy. And he was very much well, that's just kind of like mob rules. Just because a whole mob goes in and starts to believe something doesn't mean that they're right. There could still be one person that disagrees, and that guy might be right. And so his attitude was more pro the individual. And I believe he was killed for his beliefs eventually. I don't know the whole history of it, but it's not anything new. You want to talk about how old this script is? It's BC. It's we're talking before Christ. The stuff goes way back. It's just, I don't know. And if you could start to teach kids about these things, it's how are they ever going to change it? That we just keep hiding the truth, and we keep hiding the history, and keep this whole big shadow over it. That's what's a good name of the film, Shadow Ring.
Well, did you know that, or not did you know, but are you, since you're reading Plato's works about Socrates, was there any mention of it, or was there any mention of the fact that he thought maybe people were made to be sheep, and not that it's just their nature? You see what I'm saying? Was he well, people are sheep and that's the way they are? Or was he well, in this society that we live in, people are basically brainwashed and made to be sheep? Yeah, I think that's what it is. I don't think that we're naturally like that by nature. I think we're made to be this way.
That's possible. I mean, I don't really know. I haven't gotten deep enough into his works to say that he puts it that way. But, because these are really a lot of thick reading, so I'm not, I haven't gone that far in it yet. But basically, so he may say that at some point, but he just kind of looks at it. He's a philosopher, so he's not trying to say, he asks a lot of questions. It's almost annoying, because he sits there and just keeps asking people well, what do you think about this? And what do you think justice is? And he asks really heavy questions of people. And most of the time, and then it was funny because I saw this thing on the BBC, and the guy was talking about if you go up to people in the street and you ask them really heavy questions, a lot of times their natural instinct is to kind of become defensive, because they almost think that you have an answer, and maybe if they say the wrong thing, that you're going to judge them. So they almost become defensive about it, but really what maybe you're just asking in a philosophical way. You're not really trying to say that you know the answer, but you're asking them, what is justice? What do you think that means? And, and people will kind of go, and they get all nervous. It's like, because they don't really, they have to think for a minute about what the answer is. And they also have to ask, is this guy, like, testing me to see if I get the right answer? And so Socrates used to do that to people. He would ask them, like, what they thought about things, rather than, do you have the answer? Just what do you think? Like, maybe you're right, maybe you're not. I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's examine it. So he was kind of like that. He would examine, but just kind of try and figure shit out. And so, anyway, I don't know if he knew he had the answer to that, but he just would often kind of suggest that people kind of liked it was more cozy and comfortable to kind of just go and not think about it and not go too deep, Yeah,
because you also got to get those muscles working. You also want to get the person. You want to make the person active in their own enlightenment instead of telling them what to think. If a person feels like they are also active in their learning process, then it makes them feel more empowered, and they are empowered, I guess, as a result, I should say, of being able to do that.
Right.
Did you have any family members that talked about like Pearl Harbor? Any grandparents or World War II or any of that stuff? Did you have any of those conversations going on in your family about their experiences of what it was like when those things were going on?
My grandfather was served in World War II in the Navy, and I did ask him because I did a report when I was in middle school, and I asked him about the Hiroshima and all that kind of stuff, and he was like, well, at the time we didn't really know that was that big a deal. We kind of knew that it was different. We knew we were doing something kind of big, but we really felt that there was no other way to get out of the war because these guys just wouldn't surrender, the Japanese. So he did talk about it like that. And then as far as Pearl Harbor, there was no mention of it, but he was somebody who told me when I was at this age, when I was probably 12 or 13, when I asked him about this, and he said, every war is financial. Doesn't matter what they tell you about religion or this, that, or the other. It's really always comes down to money. And I remember that was kind of a surprise to me that he put it that way, because I thought, some people were bad people, and they had to be taken out because they were bad. And he was just like, no, it's really about money. We don't really care about those things that go on in other countries unless there's a financial incentive.
What was Pearl Harbor? Was it 1947? My parents were really young, so they probably don't even... December, or 1941. It was still... My parents are, just barely born.
No, this is my grandparents, though. What about your grandparents?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't really talk to my grandparents about stuff like this. I wasn't even... I wasn't interested. And now that they're gone, I wish I would have talked to them, asked about things that happened. I think I was more interested with this Jim Crow stuff. I really asked some of the older family members about that stuff more than World War II. But yeah, I'm always curious to now that I'm into this stuff, I'm always curious to know that have taught. That have actually experienced or it's like we're going to be telling our kids about 9/11, our grandkids about 9/11. Really. Back in 2001,
Exactly. So long. At the turn of the century.
Yeah. Oh man, I felt.
Oh, that's right. You guys lived in the last century. You lived in the 20th century. My God. I
know, right?
Growing up, I never thought about living in a whole other century. It never crossed my mind really. I guess I knew that I would, but it wasn't like I was going, oh yeah, there's going to be a 21st century and I'll be there. It's just weird, huh?
I know, it is very weird, but it's also very exciting because I think with the internet, it's a huge game changer about how much or how many lies and how much lies that. How much lies, my grammar's perfect, right? How many lies people are able to get away with. The amount of lies and trickery and deception that people are able to get away with nowadays, it's definitely changed things because it's easier to get the truth out there. Everything's out here now. Now, the key is just with the oversaturation of information, hoping that the right people would get the information that empowers them. And it doesn't get lost in the shuffle, but yeah, it's fascinating. It really is. I mean, yeah, I never thought about that either. I was about to say I felt old. I had a kid in the class a few years ago, and we were talking about. I was like, yeah, don't you remember 9/11? And they're like, wait, I wasn't even born yet. I was like, oh shit, like I felt so bad.
Right, I know.
Like, oh yeah, you were, or they'll say something, that was the year I was born. I'm like, oh my god. I know. We weren't even born yet either, huh? I know.
Yeah.
So that's just interesting. It's really fascinating. I remember when 9/11 happened, and I was just shaken up, and my mom was shaken up too. But at the same time, she was just like, like later she came to me and talked about. She's like, this is the first time you've ever experienced something that's like traumatic on a national level, because when Kennedy got assassinated and Martin Luther King got assassinated. Those are people, it's to kind of send a shockwave through the nation, just like 9/11, and it's a traumatic experience because I've been through something like this before. And I think Vietnam, she talked about Vietnam and all that stuff, and that she had already been through,
Yeah.
But I just think about my parents and just all the things that they've seen. They're in their 70s. They had me pretty late, but they're in their 70s now, and they've seen a lot of shit. And not only historically, but also just the technology, because I think when they were born, TV was just coming out, and now from television to fucking iPads and cell phones,
Yeah, little tiny TVs and a watch.
I know.
Watch, you can put it on your. I mean, it's just all crazy. I remember when I was a kid and I saw some movie where things were like machines were like talking and people were going up to towers that would talk to them, and I thought that that seemed so far in the future. And then the first time I went to a parking garage, and this was even like. This was like before 2000 or something. I was in my 20s at the time, and I went to a parking garage at the movie theater, and they had just installed this new thing where it was like talk to you. It was like a machine talking to you, and I was like, "Whoa, science fiction!" And now it's just normal. I mean, machines. That's like old technology now. It's like, who cares? This was, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, that's. I remember the Jetsons. And the talking telephone TVs, and now we're using Skype to record this interview, which has the capabilities of having video as well.
Oh, dude,
crazy.
I used to be. I mean, my parents. I learned how to type when I was a little kid on an actual typewriter.
Oh, the ones that like the keys would cross each other if you type to me at the same time.
Yeah,
that. Oh
right.
man.
You have to backspace. You were lucky if you had one that had like a corrector that could backspace on it. Totally. But then sometimes you didn't have one of those, and you had to use some whiteout and hold it for
I have on one of those machines too.
Yeah, and so I used to go in the summer, even really little, and I would work at my parents' office, and I would play little games because it would be boring as hell, and I'd be on the computer, and I would be playing little games that I was typing secret codes to other people, in other places across the world or the country. That was my imagination, right? And then that ended up being the internet. I mean, it's I do it all the time now. I send people emails, I do that every day. It's but in that time, there was nothing like it, and I didn't know of anything like that in reality. It was just in my head, that's something that I was going to play. And I'd probably seen it on a James Bond movie or something, that kind of thing before, but I don't know where I got the idea. I just I was just playing it in my own head, and I wasn't even playing with anybody else. I was just by myself, like coming up with ideas of cool things that I was doing because I was just sitting there typing like boring, copying things for my parents, and I was really little, like 10 or something.
Well, you know what? Too? It's like the internet is based on the idea of the collective unconscious.
Elaborate on that.
Like how, you've heard about the collective unconscious, how everybody basically on a subconscious level, we all like kind of have, there's this, there are thoughts that all connect us and ideas that we're all connected on a subconscious level. You ever heard that before? You never heard of the collective unconscious?
No, I have. I just wanted you to elaborate on it.
Okay. So now, with the internet, it's more external, but, it's not really internal, but it's external. But we have this World Wide Web that you can put up websites, you can blog, you can, trade ideas and images and talk to each other in different, countries and different areas of the world. It's all based on that, So
that's an interesting way to look at it, because you're saying that it's a like physical manifestation of the unconscious one, or
Yeah, it's basically, I think it's a physical manifestation of the collective. It's really part of like Jungian psychology. This is his like theory, the part of the unconscious mind that is derived from like the memory of ancestors or ancestral memory and its experiences, and it's common to all humankind. So yeah. So it's very, I look at it like this. But it's funny too. Lately, I've been looking at a lot of the technology and a lot of the quote unquote science that has been invented, and it's all based on human biology, or stuff that comes from humans, right? Like, if you think about a camera, a camera is based on the function of the eye. If you think about a computer is based on the function of a brain, right? It's just like a brain, basically. I think even though this technology can empower us, it's also, and we've done a show on this, it also could, it's making us, it's kind of like, what am I trying to say? It's taking us away, I think, from our natural selves in a way too, or it can, if we're not careful,
Right. Yeah, no, it's true, yeah. I think that if you look at like every kind of religious, theology, or the faith-based, even practices, whatever you want to call it, there's always this kind of like something that comes in and takes us away from being. And if you look at the Christian religion, they have like the Garden of Eden, somebody's tempted by something, and then all of a sudden it's like everything goes to shit, If you look at the Taoist religion, they everything was one, like all the creatures and the animals. There was no like fighting. Nobody was trying to kill each other. Yeah. And then they started getting too caught up in possessions, and wanting to accumulate things. Before, they didn't really care about that. There wasn't, they didn't have to fight against injustice because there was no injustice. Yeah. People just were good to each other. They were just kind to one another, and they understood it. It was like a universal way. And now we have to. Hi, yeah. So she's trying to steal the show. She's trying to steal my mic, so she's getting mad that I'm telling her. No,
she want to put in 2 cents.
Yeah, she's wanting to put her 2 cents in there. She's got something to say about that. I'm back.
She's like, I'm back.
But yeah, I can see. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. I never thought of it that way before, as far as being the collective unconscious, like a physical manifestation of that. So that's a good way of looking at it. It's so easy to corrupt that, and then
it's so harder to corrupt the collective unconscious, but it's easier to corrupt. Not that I'm not saying like the internet's evil, and I'm very grateful for it in the times and the society that we were living in personally. But, you know, had we not gotten away from that, would there even be a need to have something like this, you know? And I think about, like, you know, a lot of times when countries would go and invade other countries, or thinking about what Hitler did during World War II with the book burning and burning information, you know, now they have this cloud technology where everything can be uploaded into a cloud. All this information can be uploaded into a cloud, but one day somebody could just push a button and it's all gone. They don't even have to use fire, you know? So there's a part of me, I think this technology is amazing, but I'm also very wary of it, because as we know, throughout time, like you said, since, I don't know, before Christ, before BC, there are people that are intent on keeping information away from us to keep them in power. You know?
Yes, indeed. And it's, like I said, it's even, you know, talked about in all the religions, you know, it just takes a few to kind of ruin it for everybody. It just takes a few to kind of ruin it for everybody. You know, it's like a few bad apples spoil the barrel.
Yeah.
And it just takes a little bit of somebody who wants to get in control and wants a little more than everybody else. You know, or thinks they deserve, feel entitled. I know, she's just going off about it. She's really upset about this thing. Oh, Alice, you know, it's really mad. You know?
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, I mean, I'm just anxious. Like you said, we're at the turn of the century, or the beginning of the 21st century. So I'm very anxious to see where it's going to go. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, hopefully for the better. We already are starting to see, you know, a lot of information is coming out, including information about, you know, proving that there is really a super class, and of people that have been basically moving the pieces around or people or pieces, whatever I'm trying to say, have been basically, I should say, controlling the world as if it were a game or a chessboard. Now there's lots of evidence now to document that you can go find that maybe wasn't available before. I wanted to say something really, really interesting I noticed the other day too, speaking of like geopolitics. I remember looking at old maps, and you can see like Scotland was a part of Great Britain, right? It's like Scotland was in the north, and then you have like England, and then you have Ireland. This is like its own island. And I just purchased a map the other day, and Scotland isn't on the map. That really like pissed me off. Scotland's not on the map. It's not even labeled as Scotland. It's labeled as Great Britain. And I thought that was really, really interesting. You know.
How old was them? Is it an older map?
No, I just bought it like, I don't know, like a month ago. It's a world map. I couldn't get over it. I mean, I could, but I also see the way of people wielding their power through changing, you know, things slowly, like maps and books and, you know, media, you know. Right? They're like that. You know, and they just went through this whole thing about gaining their independence from Great Britain, but they were still a country. So technically, according to this map, it's not a country. So if I show my children, my grandchildren, this is the only map that I have to show them, Scotland has basically just disappeared.
Right.
It's kind of terrifying.
That's rude. Yeah, that's so beyond. Yeah.
I've seen maps of Palestine, where I've seen old maps of Palestine where it was mostly Palestine, and through the years it's changed, and now it's just Israel. I didn't check to see. Pretty current maps have the same, have basically show that area as being Israel now and not Palestine. So and there have been there's like this somebody did this really good meme where they show the progression from Palestine to Israel, where it was mostly Palestine, and then through the years, you know, it's progressively changed to where it's just like mostly Israel and like a drop of Palestine. It's to me, that's insulting and terrifying. I mean, there are really no words to describe it. And you can have that argument, well, we're all just, one people, and we don't need lines in a country, but this is people wielding their power over a certain group of people. This is basically not genocide. I want to say imperialism.
Yeah, that sounds like a good word for them.
This is an imperialistic attitude to the world, and you think about Britain, and, they can't, Scotland wants its independence. Why does Scotland have to fucking fight for its independence from Britain?
Right, because they just took it, like, a long time ago, or they just came in there and...
Yeah, that is... It's just so, like, I mean...
Like, get over yourself, England. Like, don't,
Yeah, and it's so funny. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I saw a headline saying that the Queen of England is now bankrupt. I was like, bullshit. Why does she fucking pawn her gold carriage that she drives around in? That's worth, like a few $1 billion. She's not bankrupt.
Yeah, what do they mean she's bankrupt? You mean she doesn't have to pay anybody? She could play that card, She's like, oh, I don't owe anybody any bills for anything, so, because I'm bankrupt. Yeah, right. Rude. And then, but, anyway, it's just ridiculous at this day and age, that speaking of the 21st century, that there's still a monarchy in England, a major, powerful country in the world, and they still have that crap. It's so silly.
Yeah.
And speaking of maps, I remember one time a while back hearing the same thing is true of Africa. Like, it's always depicted smaller than it actually is in all the maps that are sold in the U.S.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. But if you look at there's a true depiction of it, and they use they in a globe, or where they try to like give it a more accurate. And then you can see that Africa's much bigger and it's than what they portray. So for whatever reason, they try and make it all tiny, seem like it's insignificant.
Well, yeah, but that's what they do. They try and make countries. I mean, because we have this obsession with size and being, meaning whether something is important or not. So if it's small, it's not that significant. If it's bigger, it's of more significance.
Right. Just trying to decide how it's such a resource-rich area, and we want to take and pillage it and take all their land and everything, take all the resources and all their everything.
It's so funny. The first time I gotten hit to that concept is when I was a kid. When I saw The King and I, have you ever seen that movie? The old, 1950s one with Yul Brynner and Deborah Kerr?
Gosh, maybe, but I don't remember.
It's funny because I remember this one scene, like she goes over from England to teach them English, and there's a map. They show, Siam, and they have their own map of Siam, where I think Siam is now Thailand. It used to be Siam. And they show this big old country, and England's like this drop on the map. And from their perspective, Siam is huge, and then England is like this little dot. And then she brings out her map, which is the opposite. And I was like, that's really interesting. And they were flipped out. They're like, that's not true. You're a liar. You know what I mean? They were like,
that's so funny.
Yeah.
You can just do that. You can just, and that's what they do with history. They just marginalize it or change it just enough, and make little things like that just different. So when you grow up, you don't know exactly the truth. You get little bits and pieces, whatever they want you to know. It's so funny and so manipulative. It's kind of evil, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's self-indulgent and evil, and just I think. It very. I don't know. For lack of a better word, I would say evil. I know there's I can be more specific, but I can't really think of the words. I'm at a loss for words to explain that. But anyway.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a quick break, I think, and then when we get back, we're going to be talking to Chris Emery and Mary Ellen Moore, who produced this film, Shadow Ring, which we've been talking about here in the intro. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. So.
Okay, bye-bye.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertees.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertees.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop www.truthtotease.com. I'm not scared. I taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good.
Mary Ellen Moore's parents helped her to become politically aware of the New World Order globalists at a young age, encouraging her to read and study on her own. She put that knowledge to work as a door-to-door volunteer in Barry Goldwater's 1964 presidential campaign. After attending college, she worked several years as an actress in LA and flew for 33 years as a flight attendant with Delta Airlines. She retired early to return to the film industry and continue her activism with health and wellness and political issues, helping others become critical thinkers in these areas as well as our status within our perceived constitutional republic of the United States. She currently lives in Austin, Texas, serving as an executive producer and vice president of public affairs with Oklahoma City-based film production company Freedom Mime Films. Chris Emery is a film producer living in Oklahoma City. His interest in film production and investigative journalism has spawned several years ago as he discovered the consistent pattern of lies and deception contained within the U.S. government's official narratives of the shootout at Ruby Ridge, WTC 93, the Waco massacre, the Oklahoma City bombing, and downing of Flight 800 and the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. Chris has given several presentations throughout the U.S. regarding the documented links between the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, and other domestic and foreign false flags terrorist attacks. He co-founded Oklahoma City-based Free Mind Films in 2011, where he works as a full-time producer and VP of marketing and distribution. He is currently co-producing his 7th documentary film, which is a feature-length project covering the history of the Council on Foreign Relations and One World Government entitled Shadow Ring. Please welcome the producers of Shadow Ring to the show, Mary Ellen Moore and Chris Emery. Hi, guys. Good morning. How are you? Or good afternoon in some cases.
Right. We're spanning 4 different times.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, thank you guys for being on. It's always a pleasure to have Chris, and it's very nice to meet Mary Ellen for the first time. So, and we were lucky enough to see your film and watch the latest release of Shadow Ring. So, wow, good filmmaking there. And so I hope that everybody goes out and sees that. But we've had you on this is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time we've had you on the show, Chris, and when we first had you on was after you did the film about the Oklahoma City bombing, which just gave overwhelming evidence that this was, in fact, a false flag. So you also talk about false flags in the film Shadow Ring. So can you just give us a brief, description of that and historically and how this plays out? What does it exactly mean to us right now?
Well, the film was actually based on 2 books that James Perloff wrote. The full book, Shadows of Power, and then the second one, Truth is a Lonely Warrior. We based it on the 7 chapters in the second book, the full book, and the first one. And James did a great job of taking, like you said, the example we had with Oklahoma City, but going back in historical context almost, looking at nearly 150 years. And we know that it goes back much farther, but we wanted to start with the timeline of the Spanish-American War. So what this does is it's, and Mary Ellen can develop on this later, it's cross-generational, and it doesn't have any particular party line attached to it. It is solid. It's historical fact standing on its own. And it gives people the tools to realize, okay, this is what happened the last 175 years, and it continues to happen at a much more accelerated pace with all of the technology we have. So we had, Mary Ellen, you could correct me if I'm wrong, 6.5 hours of footage after we played out the screenplay that James had written for us. And it was a brilliant job, but we could only market about a 2 to 2.5 hour movie. So we had to take the best of what we had, and this is the result of that, and we've been getting rave reviews. For example, and I'll just give a quick summary here, the screening we had in Oklahoma City on May 2nd, we had 122 people show up. As the end credits were rolling, we got a standing ovation, and we had all the way from 12-year-olds to 82-year-olds approach us separately as film crew members. Just they were ecstatic, and some were very upset. Some had relatives that were killed in, the Korean War, the World War II, Vietnam War, and they were just incredulous. He says, "My God, I never knew this put in historical context." So, thank God, that's at least one of the good tools we have to work with the film.
Yeah, and you guys do go into the history of, and I know there's a lot of them, and you guys couldn't cover all of the false flags we've had in that span of time, but a couple of ones that were really standing out to me, maybe I didn't know as much about it until I saw your film, was the first one was the sinking of the Lusitania. And so that, I mean, maybe that's, that's been a while, so I don't know if people really understand the significance of that. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Go ahead. I'll defer that to Mary Ellen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The Lusitania is a very interesting false flag because the powers that be at the time really needed to get us involved in the war that was coming. The Lusitania actually happened before World War I, and Wilson at the time was running on the ticket, he kept us out of war after World War I had already started. But once he got elected, the Lusitania was used to demonize the Germans and get us involved in a war that we really had no business getting involved in. But that particular ship was a liner that was on its way to England, and it was sent on purpose into waters that they knowingly had German U-boats in. And in fact, they'd broken those codes and knew exactly where those U-boats were. The Lusitania went through the waters there in the English Channel without any escorts, without any other ships, and it was torpedoed, and one torpedo sank that ship in 18 minutes with a lot of Americans on board, and many were killed, and that ship went down so quickly, but it's because of all the munitions that were on board. We were actually, through J.P. Morgan, helping to finance the British, so that ship was loaded with munitions that were being sent to England. And Germany had warned us. They had even taken out ads in a lot of American newspapers about being on ships, coming to England, and make sure, because this was a passenger liner. It was not a warship. So this is the kind of thing that, to get us involved in the war, they have to either stage these things, and then the press, the controlled media, takes these things and demonizes the latest boogeyman to get the American people all riled up. So that's kind of the nutshell version. Of course, it goes a lot deeper than that with the assassination of the Archduke and all of that. But that was how they got us involved in a war that we had no business being involved in. And George Washington and many other founding fathers had warned against foreign entanglements.
It's very funny because the same pattern happens today, and you would think by now that people would recognize it. It's the same, like, stage a false flag or stage a situation that isn't true and then send the troops in. And now, with the advent of the Internet, it's really easy to look up this information and see the pattern of history repeating itself, but there are just some people that don't seem to get it. Why do you think that is? I have my own thoughts about why do you think that is, but
you got to control people, and you control everyone by keeping them in a state of fear. Very, very important, because people don't think clearly when they're in a state of fear. And there's been books written about this. It's a psychological operation. I mean, it's been done over the years many, many, many times. Our movie gives just several examples of this in a war situation. Now, I want to go on record as saying, look, I believe in freedom through military victory. I believe in a nation having a strong national defense, but I emphasize the word defense. The Department of Defense was originally called the Department of War. There was a psychological little trick right there. They changed it to the Department of Defense, and we know you can see right there how psychological that is.
That's very 1984.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I was reading in your bio, which when we were going over the sound check, I read your bio before, and I thought it was really interesting that your parents actually taught you a lot of the stuff that you know now about this stuff. What was that like? I'm just curious for you too, just growing up knowing this information, because I feel like a lot of people, in my experience, that have come across this information have found out as adults. But I think when you're a child and this information, and maybe your other friends have a very mainstream point of view, it might be really tough. Or was it? Maybe it wasn't. Were you homeschooled? I don't know. I'm very curious to know.
No, I grew up in Minnesota, and back then you never had to put your kids in a private school necessarily. But my parents were very conservative, but it wasn't the conservative of today, the George Bush conservative. It was a more of the conservative that were the anti-communists. My parents were early members of the John Birch Society, and what was really good for me was not only did they talk to me, and they wanted me to read all this stuff. I was quite young at the time. When I went door to door for Barry Goldwater, I was like 9 years old, but it was really fun because, I understood, I got the gist of everything, and I remember the landslide election. I remember watching it on our black and white television. But Minnesota was always kind of a liberal state. It was, Hubert Humphrey country and George McGovern. But even the Democrats were different back then. But why I was so fortunate was because my parents, they wanted me to read and think. So when I went, our public schools were pretty liberal. But because I was getting both sides of everything, that taught me to weigh everything out. That taught me how to be a critical thinker. And I believe that's what's missing today. And I have that in my bio because whether it's health and nutrition or politics, you can see how people are easily swayed, and how the media controls, how television controls, how everybody's being controlled. So I was really fortunate. I'm very blessed, I must add, that had parents who were very much, believed in talking to young children as if they're adults.
Yeah, you are. That is a blessing. I've actually known a few people too that kind of their parents didn't really teach them to be like that, but I have one friend in particular, I don't know where he came from, but he just figured a lot of the stuff out, like, I don't know, at 10, 11, 12. And for him, I felt it was interesting because I think it was kind of a lonely existence for a while, growing up, kind of having this awareness of how the world really works, because you try and talk to other people around you, and they're like, oh, you're crazy, or that's stupid, or, they call you names, and it's really interesting. And, if I have children, I definitely want to teach to them or raise them like your parents, raised you. That's really cool.
Yeah, you just, basically, I always say to people, absence of proof is not proof of absence. And I don't care if they call me a conspiracy theorist. That doesn't bother me because I always give them the dictionary definition of conspiracy. And I said, are you saying that this doesn't exist? Because it does. It even exists in groups of people that are friends, so it's a laughable title.
It's like Gossip Girl. All these soap operas, and they go, with people conspiring to harm people. And I think it's naive to think that doesn't go on a larger level, But, I was asleep to a lot of this information at a time, so I try and be forgiving. It's hard sometimes, though, but, to people that are asleep.
Yeah, and then another point, about you guys are just kind of like looking at the history, and I don't know how exactly does the history gets so askewed that people go into the public school system or something, and then they just get a completely different version of what goes on. And so you talked about the sinking of the Lusitania, but then you also mentioned Pearl Harbor in the film, and I think that's another thing people kind of don't, we don't really recognize. There's this sort of, heroic look at the president as if, we went in and we saved all these people from concentration camps in World War II, and that's just not really the case. There was sort of an underlined agenda as far as getting us involved. And so, what do you guys think about that? First of all, let's talk about Pearl Harbor. So what was it that you go over in the film?
Well, we just go back in the timeline, and once again we present the official narrative, and they say, well, that wasn't true, and this is why. And James did an incredible job. James Perloff, the author, did a great job of researching it. And we were able to find a lot of the documents. He gave us the sources for the documents, the photos, and the clips we have of the speeches, and the actual audio from the post-war hearings for General Short and Admiral Kimmel. They were exonerated of all their charges. They weren't going to be court-martialed, and this closed hearing was the minutes that were typed from the hearing were put under a presidential seal. That's correct. Mary Ellen, I believe, and Roosevelt sealed it for I believe, close to 75 years. Or it's 50 years.
Yeah, Yeah, it was. There were some initial things that were sealed that made them able to take it to court, and then those results, I think, were sealed for. You're right, another 50 years or so. And why? Why is that? You know, kind of like the Warren Commission, like many things have been sealed because they want everybody to be dead by the time things are revealed. Right, Chris?
Yes, exactly. And there's a classic example with the Oklahoma City bombing on the 15-year anniversary. The governor is at the memorial under the survivor tree. They had all of his dignitaries and everybody trying to ingratiate himself with his cabinet and the press. And he signed a proclamation and a bill that gave the Oklahoma State School Board, or basically the head of the Oklahoma State Education Commission, the authority to present only the official narrative of the Oklahoma City bombing and the textbooks that are going to be distributed statewide. Now, if that isn't censorship, I don't know what is. I was just shocked.
I want to comment on that. I actually had to teach a lesson on that, Chris. I think I told you about it.
Yes.
I had to teach a lesson. I was, like, infuriated. So as much as I could, I tried to, you know, and they were young. They were, like, I don't know, like 9, 10. You know, I tried to kind of add my 2 cents too, but you know, about what really happened, and it's really hard, you know, too, as a teacher when you have to teach this stuff because, you know, you have to teach the curriculum that they give you, that you can't deviate from it, and then if you want to add your own stuff, you have a limited amount of time to do it. So it's just really, I don't know, it's evil, I would say, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
You're just blatantly lying to the students. What do you call that? There's no objectivity. There's no honesty. So you're right. You're spot on with that. But getting back to Pearl Harbor, in fact, we had a Korean war vet. A friend of his was killed in Pearl Harbor, and he was a pilot. And of course, they had all of the ceremonies and everything, and the anniversaries. And after he saw the movie, he says, "Wow, what would it take to sell this film at the National Park site there at Pearl Harbor?" And I says, "That'll be quite a task. We can't even do it here in Oklahoma City." But you know what? We've got the ability now to get out worldwide on this, and we're just thrilled to very, very blessed to have this opportunity and present the information the way it should be presented.
Yeah. Did you ever? I was looking at how they in the movie how they were talking about the presidential process and the elections and things like that, and I was wondering, did you ever harbor the belief that anyone can become president, and what was it like when you found out that that wasn't true?
Mary Ellen, you go first on that.
Sure. You know, we've seen this happen numerous times over the years, and you can see it happening right now. Now, I'm not saying I'm for Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, but you can see how they are not the pre-selected candidates that are now pre-selected for us. So you see where Donald Trump got like 14,000 people at his rally in Phoenix, and I had the Fox News Sunday morning thing on, and they had this whole panel of these talking head prostitutes discussing how this was a flash in the pan and how he's disrupting the game plan of the Republican establishment, and how Nikki Haley got on there from South Carolina and talked about we need people up there that are going to bring people together, and they just go apoplectic. So then they figure out how they can demonize and marginalize. I worked on Pat Buchanan's presidential campaign in 2000. Again, as soon as he announced, and he was kind of forced to leave the Republican Party and ran on the Reform Party ticket, and they brought out the big guns and demonized him. And if you can't fight somebody on the issue, then you go after them personally. If you can't go after them personally, you just ignore them. You remember when Ron Paul when he come in second and first on a lot of primaries, they left his name out on the news, and even Jon Stewart took it up. So this has been going on for years. I mean, Barry Goldwater, the things he stood for, he should have taken many more states than just the state of Arizona, but ran that ad showing a nuclear weapon going off. And it was right after the 64 election that LBJ, escalated the Vietnam War. This has been going on. It's all propaganda, and they will never allow another Ross Perot to do what he did. And people say, you have to vote and all this kind of stuff, and these presidents. No, you don't. I mean, the reason I say that is because I don't trust the black box voting boxes. I think they're rigged. I honestly do, and I never used to think that. I said, well, they couldn't do all of them. Well, when you don't have a paper trail, you are sunk. So it is very conspiratorial, and people just cannot see this. They are so blinded by, well, first of all, I think that nobody wants their world rocked. So they have to believe that this two-party system is going to offer them the alternative to the other guy, which, as our movie points out, the other guy and their guy are both puppets of the quote-unquote man behind the curtain. So, I mean, I can see it. I mean, I know you obviously can too. I try to get other people to see it. I just had two liberal friends of mine, a husband and wife out in California, sent me an email. They had just watched our movie, and I didn't know what they were going to say, and I think I sent Chris the copy of the email. But they were raving about it. They said, yeah, this is incredible. People need to know this. And they're liberals that don't like Bush and Hillary. There's those people out there that they like their party, but they know something's wrong. They just don't know what's wrong. And that's where we're hoping that this movie will help people connect the dots and go, oh my God, this isn't left or right. It isn't Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. This is truth.
Yeah, do you think it's even effective to vote at the local level?
Yes, I do. But the thing that I'm fearful about is a lot of things that are coming to our local level are, we have Rosa Corey is one of our interviewees in the film, and she's the last word on Agenda 21, and she wrote the book Behind the Green Mask, which is excellent. And she's a Democrat, and she's totally awake. She's a constitutional Democrat, and she talks a lot about how we can't just pay attention to these presidential elections. Our small towns are being taken over. They run people in the city councils. They bring people move to the area. I see it happening here in Texas where I live. So, and certain cities, the Agenda 21 thing it's really creeping. It's creeping along very slowly, but these cities are all kind of, so we have to really pay attention to local elections because that's where we can't make a difference and we should be able to make a difference.
Yeah, it's creeping up like the blob,
Yes,
it's like sucking, for sure.
Exactly.
We've noticed that for sure, and what's going on with SB 277 in California, and seeing like how all of the politicians, and you can even go and see. You can go to, there are a couple websites. One is I think OpenSecrets.org, and there's another one, but you can go and see where they get their money, and it's all from not all, but a huge chunk of it's from pharmaceutical industry. So are they going to speak out against them? No, they don't care, whatever, but I'm curious also to know if did you approach Kevin Sorbo about narrating this project, or did he come to you, or how did that come about?
Mary Ellen was the
Can
one
I take
who
that?
Go ahead.
I had met Kevin about 22 years ago in Los Angeles before he even did the Hercules series, and he's a very good friend with a friend of mine, and we were kicking around ideas of people who we'd like to have narrate the film. And I remembered him, and I remembered he had done some commercials. He did Lincoln, cars, and he did a couple others. And I know he has a great voice. He's a fellow Minnesotan like I did. So I knew a friend of mine had his phone number. So I called him and just threw it out at him and told him what we were doing. And he's of the conservative bent. He's very much waking up. And he agreed to do it after talking to Chris. And of course, Chris presents things so well. And he said, yeah, I'm on board. And he even took a little bit of a cut and pay to be able to help us, because obviously he's a pretty high up there Hollywood actor. So, but he believes in what we're doing. So he agreed to do it. We're so happy because he has a great voice.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting too, because April and I kind of talk about this a lot of times off air, maybe on air too. But the whole thing about celebrity, it's kind of for me, it's kind of like a mixed bag, because on one hand, you look at them, you're like, wow, they're people, they're not gods like people deify them, to be. But at the same time, because when you're a name or a face and you have so much influence over how people think, it is really exciting, when somebody comes and speaks or becomes a part of a project that can, help to wake people up, Do you think? I mean, I'm just assuming you were. You said you were pursuing acting for a while, and you were in Hollywood and stuff. Do you run across? What was your experience like in Hollywood, dealing with some actors and actresses, and their worldview?
You know, to me, the Hollywood crowd, that some of the best people I've ever met, and also some of the worst people I've ever met. But overall, they're pretty left wing. But some of them don't even know why they're left wing. It's trendy. It's a trendy thing to do. It's how to belong to the in crowd. And those people, you know, they're so insecure. So many of them, they have to belong to the in crowd. So the ones that are like, I don't want to use even the word conservative, but the ones that go against the mainstream Hollywood are usually in the closet, so to speak. They will, some of them now, more and more of them, and I think Chris will agree with me on this, that more and more of them are starting to speak out and stand up because everybody's 1-800 fed up.
Well, there's a case in point with, I believe, Jim Carrey, and it strikes home with your cause, I believe, with vaccination, correct?
Absolutely.
It was really, it was awesome to see him step up like that and, you know, go against the grain. Kevin, after Mary Ellen was instrumental in getting him on board. We met in May of 2014. He was at these Comic-Con conventions and still riding on his great reputation both with Andromeda and the Hercules series. And at first he thought we wanted him to do the voiceover for the director's cut for the A Noble Eye, and then of course he saw the script and corrected himself, but he was jazzed about actually coming back on board to do the Oklahoma City bombing movie, a follow-up to that, so we were very flattered. And then of course that was in May. In July of that year he cut the Maserati commercial. It's got several 100,000 views on YouTube. Does a beautiful job on that. I'm thinking, wow, I think we hit a home run here. But he was shocked at the material. In fact, Mary Ellen, tell them what happened in the sound studio in Hollywood when you were there for the 2 days.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty funny. And of course, you know, Kevin's awake, but he didn't know very much of this information, the false flags and the Council on Foreign Relations. So he was in a very closed-in sound booth, and he had to open the door every 15, 20 minutes to get some air in there. So we took these short little breaks, and he would just pop his head out like 4 or 5 times. Oh my God, is this true? Is this really true? He goes, I've never heard this before. He goes, I'm incredulous. So he was, and then Austin Green was sitting in there with us, and he just kept going, yep, it's all documented. It's all documented.
Yeah. It is surprising sometimes. You think that you're awake and you're aware, and then all of a sudden you learn something new and you go, oh my God, I didn't know that. That's, I find that with, because as Chris mentioned, we're in the vaccine cause really big, and so the more that I uncover, the more I go, it still shocks me 8 years into it, 8 years into research, I'm still going, wow. You guys probably come up with that once in a while too, don't you? Every once in a while you're surprised, or are you past that point?
No, it continues. The minute that you're not surprised anymore is the minute that you close your mind, and it's just they come at you from different angles using different techniques. What's really sad, and it's very insidious, is how the younger generation, and here I'm getting to sound like my dad, but nowadays it's not so bad anymore. But how insidious the younger generation, they're being exposed to stuff that simply is not true. I mean, on so many levels. Yeah. And we're very, very humbled to have these 12-year-olds approach us after the film, and they were homeschooled, very knowledgeable, very well spoken, and I thought, wow, this is the chord that we want to strike for many, many generations.
Yeah, I mean, we have my 12-year-old is homeschooled also, so that would be a good film to. So we have what I call documentary Thursdays. So we watch a documentary on Thursdays. So it would be a good one to incorporate into our program when we start up again in the fall. So because now I'm giving him a summer break.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, because it's a history lesson. It's very applicable to what kids should be learning in school. And if they're learning at home, then you can choose the curriculum for them or help them, guide them to choose their own, which I think is the best way that children learn. Maybe Mary Ellen had that experience growing up. That's fortunate for her, but most of us didn't. Most of us went to the public school system, and they kind of just force feed you. So
yeah, it's like prison. It's kids.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it is that severe. It really is. And but speaking of that, you're talking about, I guess, it seems to me that this generation it's not a lack of information, it's a saturation of information. So it's almost like it becomes white noise at a certain point. You kind of tune out, you just tune out any alternative view because it's just overwhelming, it's just too much. And so do you ever, so we had a question in here about, the media. Do you, at this point, is the news even worth anything? Or is it just white noise? Does it mean can you actually look at it and get information from it, or is it just a waste of our time?
Or the big ball of bullshit lies?
Right.
It's all right. You know what? There's many times we want to say that on the radio interviews and can't, but clear distinction here, and you all are aware of this, between the independent media and the mainstream media. Now, Ben Swan, great example here. He does the intro interview with us in the film. He is, as of the first Monday in June, and Mary Ellen and I know his, what do we call it, the personal assistant, Mary Ellen, Evan?
Yeah.
Evan, shortly after we relocated, I talked to Evan, and he says, Ben has taken a position with CBS News. He's the PM anchor in Atlanta. That's a top-tier market, one of the 6 top-tier markets in the country. But in his contract with CBS, he says, I will come to work for you on several conditions, one of them being that he could still continue his independent news website, which is phenomenal. So he's in a rare position to not only see the mainstream as an employee, but to broadcast news as it should be broadcast, bringing in all of his professional acumen and his experience with Fox in Cincinnati. And so when, I'm driving down the expressway talking to Evan, and I'm thinking, wow, what a rare opportunity we have with him to help us promote this film. And he has a very well documented perspective from both angles. So to answer your question, yes, independent media, mainstream media, not only no, but hell no. And I worked for them independently for 4 years myself back in the early 80s. I saw how they did things.
Right. And it's true, and if somebody is kind of in the mainstream media and then they speak a little bit of truth, they end up getting fired or, ostracized like Judge Napolitano. I think he still does some things for Fox News, but he used to have his own show, and then as soon as he said a little too much, he was kind of like, well, we're done with you. Or at least, that's how I saw what happened there, but I don't know how you guys perceived it, but he seemed like he was just, a little too open for their taste.
No doubt. And I'd love for Ben Swan to just do a little experiment and say some things that are a little controversial, just to see how long it takes for them to call him into the office. I'm always interested because, but I always like to know now, okay, where did the orders come from? Do they come, is it would it be at the local Atlanta level or the higher up network? That's what I find so fascinating. And so Ben's pretty outspoken, so we'll see how he handles this. It'd be worth tuning in, excuse me.
Yeah. And do you think at this point in history that it will even matter what we can actually prove? What you guys go through in this film is basically just presenting historical fact. It's just this is what happened, but at the same time, we're at this kind of dark point where everybody's sort of it doesn't matter what you can prove; they're just going to close off to it. And so the minute that you even try to speak, they'll say, you're a conspiracy. They just shut it down. It's like this. It's like it triggers a response almost that's
brainwashed.
Programmed. It's like a programmed response that the person doesn't even absorb the information, before you're finished delivering a sentence. And so, that's how I've seen it over the last few years. It's just kind of gotten to this point where it's like this brick wall. And yes, there are people that are opening up and waking, but then there's also some that are going even a little more closed into the closet. So I'm just wondering what your opinion on that is, if you think that there is hope that we can kind of, break through some of that, or should we just forget some of those people? We just have to let them go.
Let me take 2 minutes on this, Mary Ellen, and then you could follow up. Great question, and I'll give you the short answer to this. Back in 2008, when we finally had some serious funders come forward for the Oklahoma City film, is myself. Austin wasn't even on board yet. We hired him in May of 2010. But there were people that used to work for mainstream media in Dallas and Oklahoma City, and it says, we want you guys to get this film out. And slowly we're able to cobble the funds together. Austin came on, and then we finally got the final funding in June of 2010. The movie came out in December of 11. To answer your question, the response we got from that film within the first 4.5 weeks after it was out, this is 17 years after the fact, it was absolutely astounding. And then that's what gave us the impetus and the encouragement to do State of Mind. And then, of course, that was wildly successful. So to answer your question, yes, people are thirsty for the truth. They want to get up. They want to have a reason to have a positive attitude about life. And just something as simple on the local or county level. Why are you existing? Why are you a family unit? Why are you going through life every day? To be completely boondoggled and have the wool pulled over your eyes every day? No. The human mind really wants to have, to live in harmony here. And I'm not being trite or simplistic, but truth will always win out. I don't care, whatever the odds are with the mainstream media, and thank God I had the perspective to work for them for 4 years, and the Mary Ellen being in the film industry, you see the other side. So, and then this film, and Mary Ellen, I'm really going to keep this close to the vest, but we had an awesome meeting yesterday with individuals that are looking at helping us distribute this film on a international level. And after that call, Mary Ellen and I were talking, and I thought, wow. We not only hit a home run, we hit this thing out of the park many miles out. And this is going to be a seminal film for young people that are looking at getting into the voting community. They may be on the verge of 18, 19, or whatever. And then the older generation that thought they lost hope. It's like, no. Bring everybody back full circle into what is really going on. Give them the truth. Give them the tools to think for themselves. And I think that's going to help, especially with this election cycle coming out. Boy, we're going to see some waves roll on this, and I think our movie's going to be a large part of that.
I look forward to. Hopefully I'll be traveling around that time. I won't even be in the country because I'm just not looking forward to all of the lies and just soap opera drama that's going to happen surrounding it. I predict Hillary Clinton's going to be the winner, and I predict that they're going to use that whole spin as they did with race with Obama. They're going to use sexism to kind of try and divide and conquer, men and women and get people fighting. I'm just not looking forward to that. But anyway, I wanted to say that these false narratives are so ingrained in our minds. And, it's really is just stories, not really facts, that's presented in schools and textbooks and things. I was just curious, have you ever thought about or making any efforts to put some of this information in a narrative form?
As far as we want to develop on that narrative as in what, film or on audio track or what? Oh,
no, just like stories, because I know like a lot of people, remember the movie, there was a movie about Pearl Harbor, right, that kind of showed what happened with Pearl Harbor, and it was like a love story, and it was a narrative, and it showed, people's personal lives, and as much as people would like to say,
side, okay.
Yeah, because as much as people would like to say that they're well read, and then they do search historical facts, I think the mainstream really learns a lot through narratives and stories, or at least their interest is piqued through narratives, and then maybe later they'll go and they'll look up the facts. So I was just curious, have you ever thought about expanding the documentaries that you're doing and making some of these movies into narrative form?
We had thought about that. Of course, there's the time and the resources. It's interesting you asked that with this opportunity we have coming up, and I can't get into details right now, but I think we're going to be able to strike a lot of chords on the human interest level and from all of the political stripes, both from the conservative to the centrist all the way to the liberal side. And the group that we have on board is covering all of the bases. So in that sense, in promoting this film and the post-production, yes, I think we will. And you're going to see, I'm thrilled that we have this opportunity. And like I said, I'm really biting my tongue here. But to go back and actually do specific cases, it's going to be costly. And we'd have to have somebody that's really sharp in writing the screenplay for us. To really
for sure.
Focused. Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Virstyne, because when you say that, I think of the Oliver Stone film JFK. I mean, that really was a huge shift for a lot of people, which of course was based on, one of the books it was based on was the book Crossfire by Jim Marrs. So, and you guys have Jim Marrs in the film, which is a big honor, I imagine.
Oh, it was awesome. Yes. We could go into how we selected the people. It was great. But let me go back here just a few steps. You made a good point on, as far as Hillary being voted, and I see a lot of this, even Mark Dice getting out. It's like, why are you voting for Hillary? And, oh, well, she's a woman. It's like, really? Seriously? Just because she's a woman? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, honestly, I think women in political office are a lot more level-headed, and they seem to reach a decision in a much more broad base and much more mature level, at least from my experience. But one of the main reasons that women were given the voting rights back, what was it, 1918? I don't have the...
Yeah.
Yes.
Right around there.
The bankers were behind that just like everything else. They wanted women to get into the job market, to have the voting rights. They gave them the false sense of empowerment because of the tax base. They wanted to broaden the tax base. That was it, the bottom line. I mean, how callous is that? But it's perfunctory. It's the way the bankers thought. So for these women to think that, okay, I have an option of voting, it's like, no, you don't. You've never had an option. You're you're a cog in the wheel. And I don't mean to sound negative, but I mean, Mary Ellen, you know the context I'm coming from. These guys don't give a rat's for men. Yeah.
No, and it's just exactly what the lady said, that we are, all of a sudden, all the racists in this country with the next election cycle are all of a sudden going to become overnight women haters, sexists. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how does that happen? Well, I'm of the opinion, and I probably shouldn't say this, it's all political theater, and whether it's the Jebster or Hillary, I don't want to say I don't care. I know that it ultimately doesn't matter because, the things keep heading in the same direction other than a few social things that get attention or distract the American people. It just doesn't matter. That it's all pre-programmed and we're preconditioned. So we will, go about our little business and go into that voting booth and actually think we're making a difference. I frankly don't care. It's not an election. It's a coronation, as far as I'm concerned.
Well put. Very much.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. It's true, because you saw the, I caught a glimpse of it, and I just couldn't even bear it, but the whole congressional hearing on Benghazi, and it's just the softball questions they're giving to her, and I'm just like, ugh, I can't even, it's just, and so, that just goes to show you, there's some fear there. They don't want to really push the boundaries too much, because she might be the next president, and, they don't want to lose their position or whatever it is that, those two families, like you said, the Bushes and the Clintons, so much power, can just pretty much are untouchable and do whatever they want. So unfortunately. But yeah, so that's, that, I guess you guys are on the same page with us about the whole voting thing, because that was one of our questions for you guys. Was just, is it worth it? And I think Ben Swan spoke on that really in your film, which is, it's really not. It doesn't, we think kind of the same thing. And so what do you make of, on that topic, since we're talking about the presidency, what do you make of, genealogy reports and things that people have done and found connections between, or, genetic relationships between certain celebrities and presidents, and, do you think that that this is all a real thing, or are people just kind of grasping at straws, or, and then, so what would you say about that?
Go ahead, Mary Ellen, and I'll comment.
Well, I've heard, and read different things that, these guys are all related and distant cousins and everything like that, and that may or may not be true. And, I've heard that, Obama was groomed from day one to take the presidency. You can go back to that whole thing, the Guardians of the Grail, how the royalty of Europe and everything were all, the royalty and the presidents and prime ministers are all descended from the, all of that really doesn't matter. It does matter from the spiritual maybe or supernatural aspect of things, but for the here and now today, none of that really matters. The thing that everybody just needs to know is it's the illusion of choice. That's all we really need to know today.
Yeah.
It's the illusion of choice.
Yeah, and Ben and Aaron Dykes and Jim Mars, so many people really develop on that in the film. I don't know. It's why it's all window dressing. So local and county level is where we really need to take it back. That's the only power we have.
Right. Yeah. And that just kind of comes back to building on small communities and things like we used to have. I believe what we're kind of designed as a human race to do is just kind of be in small communities and raise, our families together and kind of just be working cooperatively together. And this is sort of, we've gone to this place where everybody's very isolated, they're very separated from one another, and then they just don't have anywhere else to go but to the government to ask for help or handouts or things like that, because they feel that that's their only option. So it's kind of a huge place that we've come from. So when you're talking about just like local government, that's sort of getting closer to this idea of going back to like a small village and communities and being connected with the people in your neighborhood kind of thing. Is that sort of what we're kind of looking for? What would you guys say?
Well, a classic example, Texas, I think, is following the lead. Oklahoma, having lived there for 12 and a half years, Charles Key, Mary Ellen had met him. He's the one that helped spearhead the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. And to see what he had gone through in the State House for 12 years, and then he took time off, reelected for 6 years. 18 years he saw full circle. And Oklahoma is a bastion of states' rights. And that's where we need to do it, because there are clear lines of demarcation in every state constitution, regardless of what state you're in, as far as the limited powers that the federal government has. And oddly enough, the state of Oklahoma, their state constitution was drafted by Gore Vidal's uncle, of all things. He was in the Teddy Roosevelt administration back in when the state was founded or signed into proclamation in 1907. President Roosevelt had Gore Vidal's uncle help draft that Constitution, and one of the things was states' rights. It's a beautiful piece of work, and it still holds today. That's our last hope there. You can't have these international banksters come in and tell us what to do on a local level. It's horrible. We're not even a country anymore. What are we even existing for if these guys are going to come in? So anyway, that's a good ray of hope there, and I think Texas is following in many respects.
Shifting gears a little bit, we talked about the false flag of the Gulf. You talked about the false flag of the Gulf of Tonkin, and I was just curious. Did you have any family members or friends who actually went to Vietnam?
I did.
Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
Yeah. What was that like? What was that like?
My first husband was a fighter pilot over in Vietnam. Well, he was actually based in Thailand, and I went and lived over there for almost a year. I wasn't supposed to. It was what they call a remote tour or an unaccompanied tour, but the United States government couldn't tell me that I couldn't go over there and live as a tourist, which I did, and there were other wives that did that. So I got to hear firsthand about a lot of things, and also, knowing a lot of fighter pilots and how this war was controlled to be. There's a lot of opinions on whether it was set out to be a no-win situation or whatever. These guys, they were even told what direction they had to turn off the target. They were told, for instance, the Russians, as you know, supplied the North Vietnamese. So you'd have their surface-to-air missile sites. They had these mobile SAM missiles that they'd mount on these trucks, and they'd move them around. And a lot of times the Russians would send their technicians in to repair the SAM missiles and the SAM missile sites and all of that. So we had to stand down. The orders came from the politicians in Washington for us to stand down so the Russians could come in and help the North Vietnamese repair their missile sites. And, and these guys, these fighter pilots, and they're all young guys, and a lot of them were shot down. Now, I was there more toward the end of the war. It was 1974, so things were really winding down then, but I still got to hear all of the stories and listen to things that absolutely made no sense at all. Here, these trucks would come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail with Goodyear tires on them. The Vietnamese trucks with Goodyear tires that they'd gotten from Russia, who got them from us. It's insanity. And then to think that, LBJ ran on a peace platform, and absolutely escalated that war as soon as he won the election by staging the false flag of the Gulf of Tonkin operation, which the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was written 2 months before the supposed alleged thing happened. The event happened. It never happened. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. I get carried away.
That's awesome. I really like your perspective on that as a spouse of someone that was involved. When I was 12 years old, my dad had a secretary. He was a professional meeting planner for 29 years. And 2 years into that, he had hired a secretary that used to work for Great Lakes Naval Station, just north of Chicago. She worked for the top brass at the base for 6 years. And I remember her telling me as a 12-year-old that her bosses would come in from the Pentagon, or they would do the tours in South Vietnam, and they would come in pounding their fists on the table, these closed-door meetings, and she'd have to be in there as a transcriptionist, taking the minutes of the meeting. They told her in no uncertain terms they could have wrapped up the war in 4 to 6 months if, in fact, they used the same rules of engagements that were used in World War II. They could have gone in and just mopped it up and, saved lives and had the declaration of surrender in the war, and then, redrew the lines of sovereignty in the countries. But Kissinger, at the Paris peace talks, deliberately stalled them and carried on the war for another 2.5 years. And these guys were like, I don't even want to be a part of this. This is not the true rules of engagement for military. And they knew that these young men and women and the moms and the dads were being sent in and killed. And it was against the grain, and I thought, wow. And now watching this movie and knowing what I know about the military-industrial complex, it was all geared. And Kissinger is an unindicted war criminal to this day. He needs to be brought up on charges and thrown in prison.
And burned in hell.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Right, exactly. I hate that dude. I just want to pie him in the face. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot to let
And then some,
We did, by the way, as a quick sidelight here, we did run across some documents from LBJ's former attorney, and they're at the San Jacinto Tower next to the Four Seasons Hotel down on 1st Street in Austin, at the top floor of that tower. And LBJ, about a year before he passed away, pretty much went nuts. I don't know how else to say it. He just lost his mind because of his conscience could not take that on anymore, what he did in the Vietnam War. And he was very upset in his notes about Kissinger doing what Kissinger did, prolonging the war, even after he was out of office and Kissinger was working for Nixon at the time. He knew what was going on.
Well, cui bono, who benefited from that? Kissinger was, what big, what I like to say is the United States is keeping the world safe for Goldman Sachs, Halliburton, Exxon, and Israel. That's what's really going on here. So,
yeah, sure.
That's exactly what Smedley Butler said. You're fighting for the boys with the sugar and the coconuts.
That's right.
Anyway, getting back to our film, how much time do we have left?
Yes.
Let's see. We could 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah. People ask us quite often how we were able to get the group of interviewees together, and that was kind of fun, wasn't it, Mary Ellen? We had a pick the best of the best. Go ahead.
So I was going to say there was a couple of people that we really wanted also that we couldn't get. Is it all right if I say their names, Chris?
Sure.
We really wanted to get Dr. Stanley Monteith, and he was too ill, and he ended up passing away, but he was someone we really wanted. We all have a great deal of respect for him. And we also were real interested, we wanted to get Cynthia McKinney in the film, because she's kind of an amazing woman. I had the chance when I lived in Georgia, when I was flying for the airlines, I actually ran into her a couple of times, once on a flight, once in an elevator, and we chatted for a few. And I really have a great deal of respect for her. I don't agree with her on everything, but boy, you talk about somebody that's woken up. She's really woken up. So she's a very interesting lady. But
was she working on her PhD at the time, I believe, right? And she wasn't able to.
That's why she couldn't, because she had her final thesis, which she was getting that ready, and she just couldn't carve out any time for us. And we were on a schedule because the crew went around the country mobily rather than flying all our equipment around. So when we were going to be in Atlanta, she was definitely not available. But yeah, but we're very happy with who we have. I mean, we had some, wonderful people, and my gosh, Ben Swan and Aaron Dykes and Rosa Corey. We had Joyce, the wonderful Joyce Riley out of Missouri. We have her wonderful insights. She's got the political and the health perspective as well, and Jim Mars and
Gerald Salente.
Go ahead, Patrick Wood and.
Yeah, Pat Shannon, Jack Blood, Gerald Salente, Catherine Albrecht, Mark Passio, G. Edward Griffin, and of course Chuck Baldwin, and Adam Kokesh. Adam attended our screening in Oklahoma City. He's on a book tour till, I believe, the middle of August, so we look forward to getting on his show. But I think our goal with this group was to clean the slate. And really, aside from G. Edward Griffin, we had no repeat interviewees. This was a clean slate. And we really, out of 23 people we wanted, we were able to land 19 of them. And, 22 of them, and 18 actually made the film.
That's really good.
Yeah, Catherine Bleish, local from Austin there. She's, I believe, she co-owns the Brave New Books. We're glad to have her in the film, too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've been to that store. It's a nice store. One of the things that you talked about in your film too, which I found interesting, was the idea of a one world government. That all of these little groups are basically coming together in order to push the planet toward this one world government or new world order. And we've seen examples of world governments in science fiction movies, such as like Star Trek, and it seems very utopian. And even Jim Mars made a comment that he thinks that we intrinsically know that the human race, that we're all one people. So what would you say is wrong with the idea of a one world government? Or is it wrong? Does it depend on who's charged? What are your takes on that?
Let me
I think it's very wrong.
Go
ahead. You go first.
Well, I mean, Jim Mars said it perfectly. He says, "Okay, you want a one-world government? Who's going to run it? You think you've got problems with international wars right now or territories? It's going to be a complete mayhem and havoc when you have one world, because there's not going to be any control. There's not going to be any cohesiveness. You have to maintain the sovereignty of these nations and respect them." And going back to a lot of what Ron Paul stood on his platform when he ran for president, it's one world government there's an ulterior motive to this small clique of people, and we say, 200 or 300 people that think that they can run the world. You think they got problems now? Oh my God. It's going to implode on themselves. So that's an absolute recipe for a catastrophe, an absolute disaster.
But not to only mention that democide is the leading cause of death, on the planet. So, people think that, they'll be safe under this idea of a one world government, but democide has killed more people than I think anything else.
Yes.
So,
Mary Ellen, what's your take?
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe there is no such thing as having world peace. That's why national entities are very important. Sovereignty is very important, because you would always have a fallback. You would always have, if a despot grows in one country, if a tyranny grows in one country, then you hopefully have other countries that can prevent the spread of that tyranny. And, that's what was wrong with the Pax Romana, and we are becoming the Pax Americana. The founding fathers warned against that, and national entities nationalism is a very important thing. And a lot of people say, no, that's the problem. Nationalism is the problem. Well, on paper, the socialistic ideal view of a one-world government and a new world order, it looks good on paper, but human nature could never allow that. Yeah. For the same reason that here's another example on a smaller scale is, I have a lot of libertarian type views, believe me, but if you take libertarianism to the nth degree, which is anarchy, it's good. There's a good definition of anarchy where you have no government. The problem with that is if human nature wasn't what it is, you could have that and it would beautifully. The problem is you've got to have, there are laws. There are natural laws and there are man-made laws that are good, because if I live upriver from you and I, poop in the stream, so to speak, and you have no recourse because you have to drink water out of that, that stream. You've got to have some way of enforcing when people go against their better natures, as what I'm trying to say. So the same thing with nations. You cannot have a one world government. It would never work, even though it sounds wonderful.
And it looks good on Star Trek.
That's right.
But it doesn't.
But if you notice Star Wars series, it didn't work. So
yeah, but not that one. Yeah. Kind of last, kind of wrapping up too. I've gotten into a couple of arguments with friends talking about the Bilderberg conference because, I was like, oh, the Bilderberg conference is going on, and are you aware of like all these powerful people getting together and meeting together? And the people that I was debating with, their response was, what's wrong? Why can't rich people get together and party, or have a picnic, or whatever? So. What is your? I have ideas, but what is your take on, events like the Bilderberg conference?
I think it should be shut down. There are no. The ulterior motives are just against our better interests, and I know that's very simplistic, but these people are. Why in the world would they want to meet in a secret enclave if there wasn't anything to hide?
Yeah.
There is no full disclosure there. It adds a lot more questions than answers, and the fact that they have heavy security and they don't want us to know what's going on, okay, that's huge right there. That's a red flag on many levels.
Well, if your friends are commenting to you what you just said, then you really can't even have a conversation with them because if they don't see it, if they don't see that that's a problem, then they're part of the problem. And it's been going on since 1954, and for many years, there was complete denial, complete blackout that it even existed. Well, now, of course, they're saying it exists, but they're also saying that it's benign and these guys just get together. But there's such a blackout, and I'm very suspicious of anything that is completely blacked out because, first of all, some of the people that attend this shouldn't be attending it at all because it goes against the Logan Act and it goes against even JFK talked about secret societies and these guys shouldn't be attending these secret meetings. Just like when the Federal Reserve had its secret meetings at Jekyll Island, the big meeting there where Nelson Aldrich, headed it up and got, these guys are senators. They're not supposed to be meeting with the bankers to decide the policy of our nation. So, no, the Bilderberg group is very dangerous, but they're just, there's roundtables within the roundtables within the roundtables, just like the Council on Foreign Relations. There's over 4,000 members now. A lot of those people are invited to join. They don't even know what they're getting into unless there's somebody really, really smart like, Chester Ward, who, woke up very quickly and came out with some incredible statements which we bring out in the film. So yeah, they're very dangerous. But the American people they just don't want their world rocked. They want to just continue. Everyone's trying to make a living, raise their kids, watch the NFL, watch the latest Survivor, or fill in the blank, whatever it is. So you try to explain the Bilderberg. I ask people, have you ever heard of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations? Probably 1 out of 30 or 40 have ever heard of it, and of those that have heard of it, less than half probably even know what it is. And it's been around since 1921, and it creates the policy for the United States and England because we take our marching orders from the bankster rulers in England. So, you can't tell people that. They look at you like, they just look at you like you have a third eye.
Yeah, for sure. I remember one of my friends, we got into a huge fight about it. And, you're like, yeah, you're right. Like, you have a third eye, but, they don't want to think, too. I think some of it's laziness, too, because they actually have to do some research or do critical thinking, and it's just easier for people just not to do that, like you said,
People should watch the film to put everything into context, a good historical timeline, and let them know that this is not conspiratorial fodder. This is it's based on fact, and there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of lives that were at jeopardy in a consequence of what had gone on. If we could plug our website, there's 2 ways you can order the movie, shatteringmovie.com. And then we can order by DVD, and then we have a link there with Vimeo to do the what they call video on demand download. You can rent it for $4.95 or actually do an outright purchase at $12.95, which is a few dollars cheaper than the DVD. So.
Yeah, it's good, and we recommend that people do that, and it's a good way to end the show because the title of your film is Shadow Ring, so talking about the Bilderberg is a good way to wrap her up, since that is part of, and the CFR, which those are part of the Shadow Ring. I mean, it's it's just to I guess add on to that what you guys were saying. It's like I guess what Virstyne was saying, kind of maybe a laziness or just, you get that phrase all the time. Well, if that were true, then we'd all know about it. Somebody would expose it. Somewhere it would be out. Well, we're here exposing it. So it's like this sort of that's what we're doing. So it's just, but I'm sure you've all heard that one. Well, wouldn't we all just know about it? So, but thank you guys so much for being on the show and sharing your film with us. It was really, really, really well done, and I think a great historical perspective. And I hope people use it in their teachings with their children, their homeschool. I'm certainly going to do that, and I would highly recommend that as one of the ways that people would use it, so that just to give a little perspective. I'm not challenged by the others as long as we have a say as well. So thank you again, and please, one last time, I know you just said it, Chris, but can you say it one more time just to end so that our audience knows where to go and find the film again?
It's all one word, shadowringmovie.com.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. All the options are there, and thank you both very much. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Coming back. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everybody stay tuned. Virstyne and I will close out the show, and you want to follow these guys and keep up with Free Mind Films and see what they're working on. So thank you, and we'll be right back.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertease.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertease.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop.truthertease.com. I'm not scared. I've taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for hanging in there. We just interviewed Chris Emery.
Yeah, I think we're saying. I think he wins for the guest that's been on the most times. Right?
I think
this is the
has.
fourth time. Because he keeps making great just movies, so we can't help it.
I know, it's good, and he's a filmmaker. He's an investigative journalist for a long time, so he's been on 3 times. I think the first time he came on, he talked about
A Noble
Eye, which was the film about the Oklahoma City bombing, and then I think we had him on another time just for fun, and then we had him on to talk about State of Mind, which was the film about mind control, and then this one, Shadow Ring, which is about the one world government.
And then we had him on another time. I forgot exactly what that was, though, because that was just 3. It was Noble Eye, State of Mind.
So this is number 4. This is
but we had him on for something else. I forgot.
I don't know. I mean, I just typed his name into our website, and then I came up with 3 shows. So.
Okay, yeah. Anyway.
Well, number 4, anyways, he's still the most, because that's I don't think we've had anybody. We've had a few people 3 times, but nobody more than 3.
Yeah.
So this would be the first time that somebody came on more, except for Sarah Sotomayor and Liam Sheff, but we, like we said, they're like family, they're friends. They're not. We consider them like co-hosts or correspondents.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the first time we had them on, each of them, we did that as like an interview, and then every other subsequent time it was more like a chat, just bringing them in to bend their brilliant minds, get them to come in and just give us their insights into things, because they're so.
I really enjoyed Mary Ellen Moore. So what a cool chick. What a cool lady. You know,
Right.
I was just huh?
She was awesome. I was glad he introduced us to her because that was the first time we met her.
What's really cool though is when I was reading her bio, I realized that she was hip to this information at a young age. I remember at the beginning I was saying, God, I wish I had this in high school, you know. And she's somebody that did, and I was just like, you know, I wish that, you know, I had a lot of this at an early age, you know, and she's a walking example of that. So, I mean, just really interesting to meet somebody that's been awake for a long time that knows this stuff at a very young age and see how they adapt to the world.
Yeah, it is. Because you don't hear that very often. Most time people kind of go through a process, you know, of awakening, like, and something happens and it transforms them. But, you know, she just kind of went in her whole life. I mean, you know, maybe my daughter Alice will have that experience because I'll be raising her up with homeschooling and stuff from day one and all of that.
Yeah.
But Mary Ellen wasn't homeschooled. But I don't know how bad the systems were when she was going to school. I think over the years they've just gotten worse and worse and worse. So now it's just like ridiculous. But you know, at one point you might have been able to come out of that thing alive, but I don't know.
No, you don't come out alive. You're dead.
Oh well, I mean, brain dead, perhaps not necessarily literally, but yes, physically, or you know, somewhat of a zombie.
Yeah, I mean, I look at schools even as a teacher. Like I look at schools, and I even drive by them. And I'm like, God, they just look like prisons. You know, they don't really look that different from prisons. And especially in LA, you know, I just see.
It's true. I know. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is. And I remember one day going to pick up Aiden from school, like when there was another. I think they called me because he was sick, so I had to go get him, like while school was in session, and I saw the kids standing out, you know, doing their Pledge of Allegiance, and it just looked so
like Nazi Germany.
Exactly. It was so, like, you know, it just gave me this, you know, do you guys even know what these people do? I'm like, you even know? Of course they don't, they're children. But I mean, the teachers, you know, do they know? Some of them might, you know. Some of the teachers are hip. A lot of teachers are writing blogs and doing things and talking smack about how the Common Core is, and even before that, One Child Left Behind, and how the systems have been just basically just demolishing the education system.
Oh, you mean No Child Left Behind? I'm like, One Child, okay, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, but,
One Child, No Child Left Behind, yeah. But I mean, there's been a lot of teachers coming out and talking about it. And, you know.
Back to what we were talking about. It's kind of funny that I remember Mary Ellen Moore was talking about how they had like the Goodyear gear. It was basically you know, captured by the enemies. The enemies had like, you know, the Goodyear. I think the oh God, she was saying something like that we gave, basically she was just talking about the enemies that we were fighting basically had gear that we gave them. And I'm just like, wow, that just happens all in every war that we seem to fight. Like how do these people that we're fighting end up having gear that we you know, ultimately make. Like I was thinking about like ISIS, how they're, you know, they're training people or brainwashing people to be afraid of ISIS, and yet, you know, they're like riding around with tanks. And I'm like, how do they get a tank? How do they get like more than one tank? How do they get all of these you know, advanced weapons? They didn't make them out of sticks, and they make them out of rocks. You know what I mean? With the resources that they have, can they really like make tanks? You know?
Yeah.
How do they get this stuff? How do they get these weapons? You know? Well, we must have given it to them somehow.
Of course we do. Yeah, because it's the same script every time, so of course we do. Anytime we see these big terrors, and that's the thing, it's, you know, I mean, I think when we were doing our shows and we were reporting about the Palestinian conflict with Israel, and, you know, a lot of people were bringing up ISIS, like, oh, you know, aren't you afraid of ISIS? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, U.S. and Israel put ISIS in place.
Yeah.
There's like evidence of that, you know, so am I afraid of us? Yeah, I guess, but, you know, am I afraid of them? Sure. I mean, if you're saying that they're vicious and they're mean, they're killing people, yes, but, you know, what does that have to do with destroying Palestinian people? I just don't get it. I don't understand how these make these correlations, like, then that's okay? It's like, I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know, it really hit me when I saw the tanks, because I know this is something you can't, like, make.
Oh, right.
You know,
Yeah,
like,
no, they didn't
just like, riding on top of tanks. I'm like, okay, a tank.
No,
but I have
of
more
course
than one. Maybe theoretically they could have gotten lucky and just happened to nab one tank, but more than, I mean, like, lots of them. Like, you know, like, come on, man. Come on.
Well, you know, our friend who is on our network, UCYTV, Brendan Tuberville, he did like some really, really good reporting on geopolitics, and he gets into Syria a lot, and he and just what goes on over there as far as with Israel and Palestine and everything. And he I forget the title of it, but you can look it up at the Activist Post if you guys are familiar with their writing, and it's a pretty extensive piece on how basically, you know, the U.S. and Israel and other countries of NAFTA countries have put together ISIS. Like he really puts a compelling argument of just how, well, not even an argument. He just presents the evidence that it's true. You know, he just shows, you know, this is it. This is where they got their money. This is, you know, da. And you can show people that who come at you pro-Israel, go, really? Really?
Yeah, you know, one thing I've learned, too, by doing this show is that you give people information, and they just want to be right. Most people, they're going to be stuck in their fucking, especially when it comes to passionate. I mean, maybe there's some people, I shouldn't be so I'm Debbie Downer about it, but I'm just like, I feel like I'm just worn out with giving. If people are open and they're not sure, and they're fine, but I'm worn out with, you know, people that, you know, you present them information and, you know, in the long run, it'd actually be information that would empower them and be better for them, but they're still so just stubborn and stuck in their ways that they just want to be right, that they're not going to even look at it, you know?
Yeah. It's true, and I think that's just a mental block, you know. Some people have blocks, they have, you know, and I think we've talked about this off air a few times, you know, people don't really I don't believe that people make decisions based on logic and reason. I think people make up their minds and decision based on emotion. Yeah. And
well, the elite knows this. That's what they use fear to quell us. This is why they also use, like, you know, sympathy ploys. You know, they show that damn woman, I shouldn't say damn woman, but I really don't take it back. She just got on my nerves. That, you know, whose baby got inconveniently diseased with the measles, you know? Yeah. And, you know, they're going to show her and put her all up on the news and everything, but anybody that's been vaccine injured, you know, they're going to squelch, but really for the same reason, because they know that people are going to look at those people too and have sympathy for them. And this is why they don't want these other people to speak or pretend like they don't exist, because, you know, they know that that's going to pull at people's heartstrings and get people to make decisions. You know? Yeah, and
this woman named Karen Kane writes a really beautiful essay, which I excerpt in. I apologize, I don't remember the title of her essay, but I excerpt it in one of my essays, and I link it back to it, so you can find it at my blog. But she wrote this really beautiful essay about her experience when she went to go protest the bill in California, the vaccine bill, SB 277, and how differently she was treated, because her daughter died. She passed away. She had a vaccine injury. She lived till she was 15, but she had a vaccine injury when she was a baby, and it paralyzed her for the rest of her life. And she, you know, never spoke. She never got out of a wheelchair, and that's the way she lived her 15 years. And then she finally did pass away from the vaccine injury. But you know, they wouldn't allow her to speak, but they parade this like little measles boy, you know, this little or girl, whatever it was, you know, and who was like inconvenienced for a week.
Oh, that's why I was like that damn woman, and I was like, I was like, oh, that sounds messed up for a minute. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah, her baby's supposed to get the measles, so good for her baby, because now the baby's immune system is stronger.
Right,
and, you know, it's not like, you know, she was inconvenienced.
Right, and all these kids that are like vaccinated,
dying and paralyzed and stuff, you know.
Right, and then continuing, and the ones that survive are carrying the measles, you know, so they're either shedding them onto other people and getting other people infected, or they're carrying them in their gut, or they're carrying them in their brain and their spinal fluids and all that, and that's why kids have problems like autism or cerebral palsy or these disabilities where that affect their neurological system, you know. It's just, but they don't, whatever, that doesn't matter because people don't make decisions based on logic. They make it based on emotion and their fear, and they're very selfish, and they want to think that they can be protected by the disease, protected from the disease, and that, you know, makes them feel nice and warm and cozy and fuzzy, and they take us anti-vaxxers and they paint us like we're ISIS. Bringing it back to that. You know, that's what they paint us like. They really do.
You know, another thing just occurred to me too. I feel like a lot of these people too are just kind of like, you know, they're so dependent on science, so to speak, because they're lazy. You know, right. I've thought about this whole thing about like this laziness and stuff, and I was talking to a girl or a lady about, you know, vaccines and stuff. She was open, but she was like, yeah, and I was like, you know, really, you just have to keep your vitamin A and D levels up. You have to eat healthy, you know, get sunlight, just simple things that would keep you healthy. And then she was like, yeah, but what about people that don't want that lifestyle, that just want to get a vaccine and just like, you know, be protected? I was like, sweetie, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that, you know. And I was talking to her too because she had epilepsy, and I was like, you know what, you want to find a cure, you need to go back and research vaccines, because you'll probably find that it has something to do with you becoming epileptic, and from there you can look for a way to hopefully find a cure for that. Sure. And but I mean, she was young, she was open, she wasn't mean, but it was interesting too. I mean, I like to talk to people that aren't really conscious, because it gives me ideas of how to approach people, what people are thinking, you know, because ultimately I'm not trying to outwit anybody or be right or win. I'm trying to, you know, hopefully empower people and help people to get healthier when I'm talking to them, or prevent them from becoming even more sick, or their children from being sick or paralyzed or having to live a life of hell. You know, I'm not, as opposed to people that are very pro-vaccine, that are just like, you know, that are on their high horse, and, you know, they really care about being right. Because I remember, weren't you like talking to somebody one day and they were like, oh, well, I'd rather my child be vaccinated and get the measles, and then somebody was like, well, what if your child dies? They're like, I don't care, something to that effect, right? Remember?
Yeah.
What did they say? It was like,
well, the person had a vaccine-injured child, the person that he was talking to, and she said, well, what if it's your child? Would you still feel that way? And then your child died, or, you know, became disabled as a result of the vaccine? Would you still feel like, you know, your child was better off getting it? And he was like, of course I would. And I was like, ugh, like, are you stupid? Like, what? I mean, obviously,
he just wants to win. There are people that are just knuckleheads. Then, you know,
and some of them are so mean. Like, we had somebody commenting on our YouTube page a little bit ago, like, just calling us names and dummies. Like, I've come to where any shows we do about vaccines, I think I'm just going to disable the comments, because, you know, they're so vicious, and they're using ad hominem attacks. Just, you're, you know, moron, idiot, stupid, you know, just and like and you know. C-word, and just like, I mean, just awful things. But as we were saying with Mary Ellen and with Chris, you know, where we like to see some of this stuff being shown is like at homeschool conventions.
Yeah.
And do a showing, you know, where everybody gets to see it, and then sell DVDs to the people afterwards, you know, to pass out to their friends or to show their kids when they get home. Things like that I think would be really, really cool, and a really way to expand this information, because, you know, you got to give up on some of these knucklehead adults that are just out there.
But are like, they have them sure of a like a 7-year-old.
Right. You gotta, like, just gotta like let those people go, because they are not turning it around. But and if they are, you know, they won't probably admit it to you, because they've just made a fool out of themselves. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think kids, you know, we can start building this stuff into the homeschool community, and reaching out to these, because a lot of those people, when I went to the convention, I mean, they're very open, they're very hungry for the truth, they like to, they're very open-minded people, and they've obviously seen the corruptions in the public school systems. That's why they've taken their kids out of school, or maybe they didn't have kids in school to begin with. That was a conscious decision. I've never met somebody that was like, oh, I just did it because I just felt like it,
Yeah.
It's like I've never, ever, they always have a story behind it. I looked at this, I went and looked at the school, I thought about it, I just never, my kid went to school, I didn't like it, da-da-da. It's like, there's always a story behind it. There's never just some kind of like whimsical thing that they just decided out of nowhere. But,
well, homeschool kids too are always, just as my experience too as an adult, interacting with the other adults that have been homeschooled, they just seem like they were just light years ahead of the regular, population, or the people that haven't been homeschooled. They just seem much more knowledgeable and intelligent. For sure.
Well,
and even before I was awake, I'd always, before I even became a teacher, I'd always dabbled in the, just thinking about in the future if I had kids, I think I'd school them. Just because of that, just because of my interactions. I'm like, God, they seem like they learn what they want to learn, and they're so much smarter, and,
Right, for real. But we're out of time here, but I want to thank Chris, Emery, and Mary Ellen for being on our show today. It's always a pleasure to have Chris on, and it was a great pleasure to meet Mary Ellen. So, that's pretty much a wrap. How about you?